Hello, welcome back to the Terra devlog, a survival and exploration game set on your very own planet. This episode is quite special to me as I finally have a working prototype of one of the most unique and fundamental features of Terra, and that is terraforming. The ability to sculpt and shape the land around you is one of my most beloved game mechanics. It opens up such a massive amount of opportunity for the player. With terraforming, exploration becomes three-dimensional. Not only can you explore your planet by running around in forests and on top of mountains, but you can also dig down to find caves and resources hidden underneath the planet's surface. And if you're more of a creative kind of person, terraforming will definitely benefit you as well. You could shape the land around you however you like, make your own little mountains, valleys, or flatten the ground around your house, for example. So because of this, terraforming has always been a goal of mine to include in Terra. So in this episode we will add terraforming, but first we're gonna have a look at generating some caves and populate them with some cave resources, so we have something to dig after. Cool! So first let's have a look at generating some caves. If you remember from my previous videos, I'm using a lot of different kinds of noise to generate my planet's surface. And even though I currently mostly have flat and hilly areas on my planet, this same kind of noise can also be used to generate volumetric shapes, such as holes and three-dimensional shapes. So, by using some simple 3D purlin noise, I will make these weird organic rock-like shapes. And when I've adjusted the scale and parameters to get a surface that I like, I can simply take this same noise function and subtract it from my planet surface. This will basically carve the noise function out of the ground of my planet, leaving something that resembles cave-like systems. Then I also need to make some adjustments to my material to make sure that it knows where this subtraction has happened, and then apply my stone color to these areas. And after that, we have something that looks like actual caves carved out of stone. Really cool. As I'm a bit scared to overcomplicate things now in the beginning, I won't try to make any super interesting or realistic cave structures just yet, but just working with a proof of concept like this is great while prototyping, so that if I decide to change how something works later, I won't have wasted a lot of time. So yes, these caves are quite simple, but they work well as a foundation, so I have something to work from later when choosing to expand on the caves. So now, when walking around the planet of Terra, you will encounter these amazing jaw-dropping cave systems. Or, well, they're kind of empty and boring at this point, to be honest, so let's try to fill them with some ores and some resources, so that we're more tempted to explore them further. These caves will of course be the main method of getting resources found under the ground, such as coal, iron, gems, crystal, gold, you name it. So to kick off our mining adventure, I'll make 3 different cave resources: iron, gold, and crystals. Then when we have a solid system in place for scattering these resources underground, we can make as many as we want. I'll also make a mesh for the item we get when mining these resources. I imagine we can make a forge or something later, where we can process these ores into actual usable materials, but we'll save that for another video. Amazing! So now we have all our chosen ore meshes and items. Time to make them into actual items in the game. And for that, I would love to showcase my new method of organizing all my item data in Terra. So if you're interested in that, keep watching, and if not, you can probably skip ahead a few seconds. Previously, I kept all the information about all my items in one of these data tables, where each row was its own item with its texture, mesh, name, etc. But for my new system, I've decided to skip data tables entirely and focus on something called data assets, which recently has become one of my favorite features of Unreal. They're basically a simple, flexible, and super powerful way of storing data about basically anything. I've begun using them everywhere else, so I decided it was time to make the jump to data assets for my items as well. So let's open one of the data assets I've made for my items. Here we can see everything about my item, such as the item ID, name, mesh, texture, and so on. And this is all saved and contained in this one simple lightweight asset. So what makes this better than a data table? It mostly comes down to preference and what kind of data you want to store for your items. If it's mostly simple items, then a data table is probably more than good enough. But one of the great things about these data assets is that they can store something called U-objects. And that might not mean a lot to you, but I'll be using this functionality later in this video, so then you'll see how it works and why it's really practical. Data assets also work with inheritance, so you could have a data asset that inherits its data from a parent and then adds its own extra data on top of it. And this is, as far as I know, not possible with the data tables. Data assets also integrate really well with the data registry system in Unreal, which means that I can easily manage, load, and access the data assets efficiently anywhere in my code, both at runtime and in the editor, which I think is really helpful. Your game will also react to changes in these data assets at runtime, so I can quickly iterate and experiment with my items at any point. I also really enjoy having dedicated self-contained assets for my item data, as I imagine a giant list of items could be quite a nightmare to work with when your game expands. Having them as assets also means that I can sort my items in folders and structure them however I want in the editor, which is really nice. So that's a little bit about data assets. So now let me show you the process of making an actual new item using this new data asset system. First, I either make a new item data asset or just duplicate an existing one and open it. I fill in all the details of my item, such as the item ID, name, mesh, and item texture, and any other relevant data. Then, when I hit play, a function in C++ finds and registers all the item data assets I've made, and that adds all this data to a map. And by using this map, I can easily find my item data by simply using the item ID. And that's it. Now this item is available in the game. So let's add the item ID to the starting items list so we can actually see it in the inventory. And there it is. So making items is really easy now. I just make a new data asset and it automatically gets registered in the game. So let's quickly make a new item asset for each of the new ores we made, just so we have that available for later. Hey, cool. So now we just need to make sure that our ores actually spawn in the game. And of course, I only want them to spawn in our caves. To do this, I will spawn my ores just like the trees, grass, rocks, and all the rest of my foliage. I of course have a system for spawning my foliage as well, which, you guessed it, uses more data assets. So let me make a data asset for my ores, which then is added to my biome data asset, which basically contains all the foliage data assets. Then, this biome data asset is read by my PCG graph, which spawns all my foliage. I also need to make sure that these ore foliage assets only spawn inside my caves. Luckily, I've already marked the cave areas with some metadata, so I could get the correct stone color in my landscape material earlier. So I could just read this same data in my PCG graph, and only spawn my ores in areas marked as cave. Let's also increase how frequent these ores spawn, just so we can quickly see the work in practice. Let's head over to a cave, and there we go. All my caves are now filled with ores. And this may have seemed like a very simple process, and it honestly was, but only because I've spent a lot of time making my systems modular and scalable to make it as easy as possible to add more of similar type of content to my game later. And this is why planning your game and systems is so important to do early on. While it seems like I'm making very little actual progress, it's really just me preparing and setting a good foundation so that adding more content becomes faster in the long run. So with that system in place, I now have ores in my caves. But frustratingly, we don't have anything to mine them with yet, so they're just sitting there tempting me. So let's very quickly make a little pickaxe for my player to use. This pickaxe then gets added as an item, just like we did earlier, with the data assets. But for this one, I also want a crafting recipe, and I went over how I make my crafting recipes in the previous video, They are also, of course, data assets, so let's make a new one for my pickaxe. And yes, I have said I will improve this with some kind of UI, so making recipes becomes a little bit more visual and less guesswork, but I still haven't gotten around to do that just yet. But it still works, so now that I have my crafting recipe asset ready, I can start the game and try to make one. Making a pickaxe is 3 stones like this, and then 2 wood below. And there it is, great. But it still doesn't work. I can't mine anything with this yet, it just kind of exists. So let's make it actually work. For all my interactions, I use the gameplay ability system, which is really flexible and works well with the multiplayer. I've not yet perfected my interaction system, as I'm still getting familiar with the gameplay ability system, so all of this will probably change at some point, but I got it working either way. I've set up an ability that just traces in front of me, and if it hits foliage, it will apply some damage to it. Then I have to make my pickaxe activate this ability. And this is where the UObject feature of data assets come in, which I talked about earlier. In my item data assets, I have a list of components that I can add to this item. And these components are all UObjects. And the good thing about these UObjects is that you can add a custom functionality to each item that not all items need to have. Like, for example, I want to make this pickaxe activate an ability when it is used. So for this, I have a UObject component called item actions. And if I add this, you will see how it works. It lets me add an input action and an ability. So when the chosen input action is triggered by the player, it will activate the ability. So I'll add my primary action as input, which is my mouse click, and then my dig ability as the ability. I've also made another component called damage to types component, which basically lets me choose how much damage this item should apply to what kind of surfaces or creatures or whatever. So I'll tell this pickaxe to apply 5 damage to any surface that has the surface.foliage tag. All my foliage are tagged with this foliage tag, so this should work well. I could later add some specific tags to different surfaces, so that I can tell my pickaxe to apply less damage to trees, for example, than to ores and rocks. But now, for testing purposes, all foliage is fine. So now, by using these UObject components, I've told this pickaxe item to activate my dig ability when I trigger my primary action, and if my dig hits any foliage, it should apply 5 damage to it. So let's see if this works. It seems like my ability is activating when I click, at least, which is great. Let's go into a cave and find an ore. This iron ore should work well. Hell yeah, there we go. Nice, I got my first iron ore, very cool. This gives my caves a bit more of a purpose. So now we have caves, we have ores, and we have a pickaxe to mine with. Now, what if this pickaxe not only could mine ores found in existing caves, but make new caves and dig tunnels to find new caves? This is where the next feature comes in, which I've been looking forward to for a long time: terraforming. As mentioned in previous episode, the planet of Terra is made using voxels. Because of this, making adjustments to the surface can be done easily by using noise and math in these voxel graphs. The caves that we made earlier are a great example of this. We make a new noise function and subtract it from the existing landscape to create holes in the ground. And the genius people behind the voxel plugin recently made an update to their plugin that allows for these kind of adjustments to be done at runtime, or while we play. They added a ton of new sculpting tools, which makes it easy to do smaller local adjustments wherever we want. And because of this, adding terraforming to Terra was no longer a big task. I modified my dig ability slightly to make room for this terraforming feature. It checks if it hits the planet's surface, and if it does, we call a sculpt sphere function. This sculpt function has a mode, which I've set to remove, and the radius, which I've set to 100. And if it doesn't hit the planet's surface, it will just continue to the foliage damage things like we did previously. So now, when we use our pickaxe, we should be able to dig into the ground. Look at that! Really cool! Let's try to find a cave. Hey, cool. I think this feature will add a lot of possibility to the game. Currently, we of course just have this digging feature, but later we can make specific tools that flattens or raises the landscape as well. That would be really cool. Nice, so that was a bit of a mining update to Terra. We have big caves scattered around our planet. We can find resources in them and mine them with our trusty pickaxe. Then we can go digging after new caves or try to find our way out of one if we're stuck. What do you think? Please leave your notes down in the comments along with what you think we should add to this system next. I would love to hear your suggestions, and if you have any questions or just want to discuss Terra or game development more, make sure to join our Discord server with the invite link in the description. I try to post fun changes to Terra from time to time on there, so if you want to join the talks, you're very welcome. But yeah, that's what I got to show you this time. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with the Terra devlog, and if you enjoyed the video, a like would bring a big smile to my face. Catch you later!